Hello, this is Brenda Green, and I'd like to welcome you to Living in the Go. I want to do this presentation for you today on love and money. I talk to people, especially women, about their relationships and how they manage and how money affects them. And so I wanted to share some of my insights. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a married woman with 6 kids, but reality set in, and I decided to become a businesswoman instead. Along the way, I got married, had a family, but still became a businesswoman. The marriage didn't last, but the insights that I learned from it were enormous. The lessons about love and money, they stayed with me over the years. So I wanted to share those. So let's get started. Now, the topics that I want to cover with you are money in your heart. Why don't we ask about each other's money? Who needs a prenuptial agreement? What causes separation? And how do we fix it? So let's start with your heart, that organ that keeps us pumping, keeps the blood flowing, but it also is the poetic thing that people talk about in terms of love. They mention the heart all the time. So there is a relationship between love and money, but the perspectives available are either understated or overstated. What do I mean by that? Money can't buy love, and love can't buy money. Money increases the chances of love, but love decreases the need for money. When you're in love, money is the least thing that you're thinking about. You're thinking about that overwhelming feeling that you have about a person, and money is not the big driver. But when you lack money and you don't have enough money for basic needs, love is kind of the last thing on the totem pole. You're really not thinking about it. At that point, love is more of a risk than anything. You heard people when they say, well, they don't have enough money, they can't really date properly. It's a fact. When you meet someone and you feel those first throes of love and passion, your hearts literally flutter. We like them. We hope they like us. It's magic time. We don't necessarily think about how our person's behavior about money can affect us. All we're thinking about at that moment is that feeling that we have. It feels wonderful. I know, I've been in love and it just feels great. It's overwhelming sometimes. You think, oh, I hope this feeling lasts forever. Well, eventually it calms down a little bit and then you start to think more logically. So when we think about the people that we decide to be with, our partners, what do we really know about them? Nowadays, couples sometimes live together before making the decision to get married. And that's cool, whatever floats your boat. You can learn a lot about a person, their quirks, their habits, before you commit to a lifetime together. Maybe you didn't know that dirty towels on the floor was your deal breaker. The socks on the floor instead of getting them into the laundry basket. That could be very annoying. But moving in with a partner before marriage or before you start talking about marriage also has its drawbacks. It tends to be unceremonious. You sign a lease, you both pay half the rent, and done. But not so fast. What happens when one of your partners gets a major pay raise? Will that affect you? Will that person start paying more in rent? What if you lose your job and you can't pay the bills? Does the other person take on all the responsibility? Suppose you're not a really neat person, but you don't want to clean. So do you pay for a cleaning service? Do you share that? Is the other partner willing to mop the floors? Is your habit of taking an Uber every day annoying to your partner because they're trying to save for the future? How much should you really be saving anyway? What about credit scores? Bad money habits? Regrettable splurges? The in-laws? Who pays for what? What type of assets do you have? Do you have a retirement account? Savings? You don't need to share all the information right away with your potential partner, but you should know where you stand and what you need to contribute. What's your income? What's your partner's income? Do you have a plan for how you're going to pay the bills? Separate finances can work just fine too. However, you need to be honest with each other about the way you handle money. It's also important to let your partner know how much debt you have so that you can plan for some of your joint expenses. To keep making decisions in the relationship, you got to have great communication. You need to make sure you understand each other when it comes to money. Talking about money can be really awkward, but the discussion must happen when it comes between you and your partner. It's no surprise that, believe it or not, Fidelity did a survey, and 4 out of 10 couples didn't know how much the other person made. That's crazy. So, what do you really need to know? Talk about your FICO scores. That's important. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it gives you a little bit of insight in terms of how they handle their money. If the partner has children, are they paying their child support? Are you with a deadbeat person? Because that tells you a lot too. If the person won't take care of their children from a past relationship, if you have children with this person, will they take care of your children? Are they savers or are they spenders? Are they generous or are they cheap? Do they ask you for money all the time? And really think about what is your deal breaker. I mentioned socks on the floor or wet towels on the floor, but there could be little things that you just can't see yourself looking at day after day after day. So know what your deal breakers are. Now, I mentioned a topic of prenuptial agreements. And some people might think, oh, I don't want to do that. That means that I'm not hopeful for the future, that I don't think our relationship will last. I'm not saying that at all. A prenup is actually something that's decided before you get married. And this agreement will happen to you and your spouse. It looks at your assets that you have before you get married. It's what you bring into the relationship. Unfortunately, if you don't do a prenup, those kind of things could come up in a divorce. And maybe you had assets before you got married that all of a sudden now, when you get a divorce, your partner wants those. And it's really not fair if it was yours before you came into the relationship. So that's why a prenup is often a good idea. Most importantly, it can preserve the nature of the property in the event that the marriage ends. So, in other words, separate property can remain separate instead of being the subject of community property or equitable distribution laws. Whatever state you're in, you need to look into what kind of laws that are in place to protect yourself. They're gaining in popularity for a variety of reasons. One is that people are focusing on their careers now and delaying marriage. So as a result of that, you certainly bring more things to the table. So you want to make sure that you're clear about what's yours and what's your partner's. Prenuptial agreements make it easy for you because when those things are spelled out, heaven forbid you do get separated, it's one less thing to have to worry about. Now, I mentioned separations and divorces, and that's pretty tricky. I'll tell you, there's a song called It's Cheaper to Keep Her, and it's by Johnny Taylor. It came out in 1973. Go look it up. You can see it on YouTube. You can hear it. The phrases are hilarious from today's standards, but it's still true nevertheless. Cheaper to keep her. You know, when you married her, the license at that time was $2, but I promise you to get divorced is going to cost you a whole lot more than the $2. So the song basically is saying, you know, it's cheaper to keep her. Find a way to reconcile. Make sure that you work things out. And I would encourage that in any relationship. Don't go into it lightly. If you decide that you want to be divorced and you have good cause for it, then that's your prerogative. But know why you're doing it. The thing I wanted to focus on is to have the conversation up front to know if you're equally yoked in all matters before you get married. Because divorce is huge. It's a major decision. It brings its own set of hardships. You get divorced, one, you got less income. Sometimes you might have to change your housing because you can't afford where you're living at on your own. You might have to have joint custody or child support for your children. All those things come into play, so you want to think about it. You might have to split your assets. If you're both working and you have 401ks or whatever at work, in some states that becomes half for the spouse to be able to take if you don't have anything? Or if you've been a stay-at-home person, how is that going to play out? So it's a lot of things to decide on, a lot of decisions to make. When should you get a divorce if you decide that's what you want to do? Because timing is everything. There are financial complications that can become an issue, so you don't want to rush because there could be a possibility that you might reconcile. You might want to file first if the divorce is inevitable because it gives you a tactical advantage and you can leverage that. Now, if you're in immediate danger to you or your children, then you want to file for the divorce and you want to put things in place to prevent that person from either hiding the assets or doing some harm to you. So all those things to consider if you decided that you want to get a divorce. So having said all that, how do we fix this? Because I believe in love. I believe in relationships. I believe if you find that special person that you want to connect to, you should do everything you can to ensure that it goes smoothly. Most people's relationships don't work out, and people always think, oh, it's infidelity. No, it's not that at all. Typically, 90% of the time, it's about money, lack of, or how you spend it, or feeling unworthy and trying to find other fixes to make yourself feel good about yourself. And that causes infidelity sometimes, but it's still related to your money issues. So how do we fix this? You communicate from the very beginning of the relationship. You talk about what you will or will not accept. You talk about the things that are important to you. The questions that I mentioned earlier, you're a spender or a saver. How are you going to work together with your money? If one person makes more than the other, how are you going to handle that? Talk, talk, talk. And when you feel like you haven't talked enough, then you know there are more questions to be asked, but have those relationship talks. If you don't have a question right now, don't assume everything is working out fine, because if you have that nagging feeling, you need to talk some more. You need to ask more questions. Don't have those doubts or that hesitation. You also want to share your short and long-term goals. If you're thinking about being able to retire at 55 and you haven't shared that with your spouse or your partner, then you're in trouble because they might want to work forever. And so they're spending as they go because they plan to work until they drop. So have those conversations. If you have debt, plan together on how you're going to resolve it. Now, before you get married, that debt is yours. And even if people are living together, I still will say, do not pay someone else's debt. And I know some people that may or may not agree with that if you're living with a partner long term, but trust me when I say, don't take on anybody else's debt. You can talk with them and try to come up with a strategy of how they're going to pay it, but don't pay someone else's debt. If you don't have to combine everything, at least understand your partner's assets. I can't tell you how many people have told me, well, I don't know what my partner makes. We don't talk about it. I've never even seen their pay stub. That is crazy to me. You need to know how much that person's making. Just because you know how much they make doesn't mean that you are going to take more money. But you need to know what you're working with. Because if your partner is making $150,000 and you're making $30,000, there's a disparity there. There's a gap. And if you're paying half the bills, that's not fair. If you're paying half the bills and half the percentage, if your rent is $1,000 a month and you're paying $500 and your partner's paying $500, but they make $150,000 and you make $30,000, that's a problem. So you need to have an awareness of what they make, and so you can make good decisions about how you split those bills. You need to be on the same page. So in summary, don't lead with your heart when it comes to money. Have the relationship talk with your partner, and as your relationship grows, more things come into play. You learn more about them. You want to do that. Prenuptial agreements are helpful to make sure your wants and your needs are met. Divorce or separation should be entered into carefully. A lot of times the issues can be traced to behaviors that correlate to money. So again, conversations will unravel some of those things and can help you. Communication can resolve a lot of issues, so you want to identify the specific goals and tackle them together. As always, I have my beliefs. Again, they're my thoughts. You can take them on if you want to, but it's just things that I think about from time to time. So I'm sharing those with you. The expression love is blind means that we see what we want to see in our partners. But don't be blind, deaf, and dumb. We have all been a fool for love at one time or another. And I'll tell you, I've been in love a few times, and I have done some dumb things. But each time, I hope that I learned from it. I'll say that maybe the next time I made a different mistake, but I certainly didn't make that mistake that I made that time. You always want to do better. When you know better, you do better. That's an expression from Maya Angelou. Don't meddle in other people's affairs because they'll hate you for it. If you find out that a friend's partner is cheating, you don't necessarily want to be the person to tell them, because if they keep it together, then they're going to always look at you suspect. So don't interfere. If a person is moving too quick and you feel overwhelmed, take a step back, slow it down. Say, hey, I'm not ready for this. Let's get to know each other a little bit more. It's okay to say I'm not ready. It's okay to slow it down. Relationships are like buses. There's one every 10 minutes. You may not like the bus, but be patient and another one will come along. Be knowledgeable about your own money situation. You don't have to depend on someone else's advice. The more that you know about how your money works, that's the better thing for you, and certainly it brings more insights to the table, so to speak. Never let someone else's insecurity about their situation make you feel bad. If you make more money than a person, you have a better job, so what? That's not to be compared with your spouses or with your partners. And if they feel bad about the fact that maybe you make more money than them, maybe they're not the person for you, because they will play that out in a lot of different ways. They'll say things sometimes because they're feeling insecure. Don't let their insecurity be your issue. As always, I'd like to thank you for your time and your attention. And please subscribe to our channel. Again, we're making a movement here. I want everybody to be knowledgeable. I want you to share this information. I want you to have thoughts around what I talk about with you. If there are things that you want to hear from me, leave it in the comments section, because this is all for you. I want to make sure that everybody gets what they need so they can have wonderful lives, be successful in everything that they do, and feel empowered and inspired. So please subscribe. And thanks, and have a great day.